For this. All right, perfect. So why don't we just start off with some introductions first? So I'll go first. So I know we had kind of met over the kind of the climate simulator camp, so to speak. But so my name is Josh Filer. I'm currently a student at Westchester University. So that's like a suburb of Philadelphia. So I'm studying economics and finance here, but I'm really interested in a lot of sustainability related issues. So I lead net impact at Westchester University, which was kind of one of the groups that collaborated with En-ROADS climate ambassadors to kind of put on that camp. So we just started up the group, and what I'm really focused on here is just finding the intersections of, business, sustainability, social impact, and how can I try and empower the students here at Westchester's campus to kind of make those choices for themselves. And then I also lead the vegan club on campus. So that's another sustainability related issue there. So I know you kind of are a man that has had many different hats, it seems. So I'm just interested to hear a little bit about your background here.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a long story, right? But just to the podded version. So I originally started out as a writer and editor like 20, 30 years ago. Did that for about a decade. Then I returned to university and did my PhD at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. That was a PhD in religious studies. After that, I moved to Australia and did some work in academic publishing and also worked teaching at Monash University in Australia. Then I moved to France and taught communications at a French university for some time. But then I really started feeling pulled to work in climate in the green economy. I'd been having conversations with students and my own children for years that, you've got to get into the green economy. It's the biggest, opportunity of the century. And I was having these conversations for ages. And then I thought, well, why aren't I getting into the green economy, right? I've still got 20 years of work ahead of me. It wasn't so easy to make that kind of transition mid-career. So I thought, well, maybe I need to create the kind of service and resources that will help people move into the green economy. And that was how Ecotopian Careers was born, which is my current initiative, which is basically I kind of create and curate resources to help people switch into the green economy. And I also provide career coaching to provide assistance as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that kind of actually perfectly leads into my first question here. It was kind of just like, what was the main driver for you to kind of switch out of academia and kind of into this green career space? Because I know that you had written, lots of books on, I think it was like masculinity, work with, indigenous cultures. So it was kind of just an interesting transition. So was it mainly just that conversation that you had like with students and people around you, just like seeing that there's a big uptick in, sustainability and green related talks? What really was the main driver that kind of made you shift?
Yeah, there's a longer history to it than that. I mean, I'd always been interested in environmental issues ever since I was a teenager. I mean, and I remember conversations around global warming back in, late 80s. And obviously I wasn't a scientist. I mean, I did religious studies at university, and I always assumed that someone else would come along and fix climate change. And then year after year, eventually decade after decade, as we know, nobody did it. Either they tried and failed like the scientists, or they outright blocked it like most of the businesses and governments. So it became more and more immediate over time. And while, as you say, I kind of moved into the area of masculinity studies, and I always felt that had quite a decent amount of social impact, but it started feeling a bit kind of redundant. In fact, everything started feeling redundant. It's like, well, if you don't fix climate, which is, unarguably the biggest challenge of the century, there's going to be nothing else left. So it started feeling, just outright wrong not to be working in this space. And what I came to realize as well is that this is a unique confluence of events going on right here, which I find very exciting. So there's three things happening about working on climate and the green economy. Number one is that it is the morally correct thing to do. Number two, it is the interesting, innovative, and creative thing to do. Number three, if you play your cards right, it's the lucrative thing to do. And I literally cannot think of any historical precedent for those three things coming together. And ultimately, you kind of got to wonder, why would you not be working on this issue? Because, it's never going to happen again, that golden moment of all of those things coming together. It's the first time that I can think of that it's happened. I can't imagine it's going to happen for a long time. Now is the time, obviously, to get into it.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a big point that I like to tell all my students. It's like sustainable business. Ultimately, businesses are realizing that a sustainable business is just a good business, because if we're not able to sustain ourselves, then there is no business in the future. There's no way to make money in the first place. So that was a really interesting point you kind of brought up. And then it also just leads into my next one. But like, why do you think that you said like all these issues are kind of converging right now? Why do you think that in the past 5 years or so, like these issues are coming more to the forefront? Because obviously these issues are not necessarily new. It's not like 2020 versus like 2010. There's a huge difference. Obviously, maybe work from home, the pandemic might have been a big one. But I'm just interested to see, because you're already kind of in the space, whereas most of the people in my group are kind of the students kind of saying, okay, there's all these sustainability jobs that are coming out, but they're kind of wondering like, why is it right now? So I was just wondering if you had any insight on that.
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on. I mean, number one, obviously, it's increasingly hard to ignore the impacts of climate change. So if you were having this conversation back in the 90s, it was out there at some distant point in the future. Indeed, people my age, I don't think we even thought that we would see climate change in our lifetimes. It was like the kind of thing that would happen to your children or your grandchildren. And because it was so distant, it was quite different to have a kind of a tangible sense of it, and therefore to be as worried about it as you should. But everyone knows that every year when the data comes out and is analyzed, tipping points are reached earlier than people expected. You get new records for heat waves, new records for droughts, time after time, year after year. It seems to be accelerating. So on the one hand, it's just become more noticeable. On the second point as well, I think there is a better kind of climate communications practice happening. It's starting to creep more into the mainstream media. That depends, what media you're reading. I read The Guardian quite a lot, which I think is probably the best publication in terms of climate communications. And pretty much every day they now have, a climate section on the front page of the Guardian website, in the same way that they've got economics and sport. And that's the way it should be, right? Because it's such a big issue. So when you get that repetitive exposure to the narrative, I mean, that's the way that many bad things are constructed in society. In this case, that repeated exposure to the narrative is the right thing to do. It becomes normalized. And then I think as well, number three, as you say, people have figured out that, they can make a business case out of it now. So 10 years ago, it was a luxury, the kind of thing that you would do if you could, nice to have. These days, enough things have come together where people are realizing, no, we can actually, not only can we make money out of this, but we have to make money out of this, because when you see what's happening in reality, from like a risk management point of view and a long-term viability of a business point of view, if you're not addressing this issue today, you're not going to have a business in 10 or 20 years time. Either your business would have collapsed due to some catastrophic risk exposure, or consumer sentiment will have turned against you, or government legislation would have shut you down. So if you're not getting across this right now, I think your fiduciary responsibilities for your shareholders and stakeholders is way out of line.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially to your point on just communication, I think that means so much nowadays, because I just remember back 5 years ago, I didn't think really much of sustainability, if I'm being completely honest with you. But then you just see all these, issues with climate keep popping up, and you realize it's like, maybe it is kind of on us to kind of make a change almost. And that was honestly one of the reasons I decided to go like more plant-based. I was like, oh, it's like, okay, like, yes, we're not these big corporations, but we can drive demand and, kind of hold these corporations accountable. If we're able to drive demand, we're able to kind of change the consumer habits and hopefully change a small portion of it. So perfect.
Yeah, I mean, the one small problem with climate communications right now is the lack of investment. So we've got billions and billions of dollars getting, flooding in, VC dollars flooding into climate tech and stuff like that, which is fantastic. Obviously, you want as much investment as possible, but only a really tiny slither of that investment is going into climate communications. People are happy to invest money in yet another app that basically does nothing other than act as a broker between people and some carbon credit organization, Vera, Gold Standard, something like that. We've got gazillions of these apps, and they still get funding. But getting funding for climate communications is very challenging. And largely it's left in the non-profit space, which is a problem because the non-profit space, anybody who's worked in the non-profit space will know that you spend most of your time working on, the existence of the organization, not on the mission of the organization. It's just so slow. It doesn't have much impact, not much resources. So leaving such an important thing as climate communications in the hand of the non-profit sector is a challenge.
Yeah, definitely, because that's why I think net impact is especially good, because it focuses on intersections of businesses and sustainability. Obviously, that can include like NGOs, but I think it's ultimately, I mean, it was kind of the private sector that in a way kind of hurt us a lot. So in a way, it's almost, we're going to have to push the private sector to be better to ultimately fix some of these issues. So yeah, perfect. Thanks for your insight on that. So just kind of my next point here. So you write a lot on mid-career transitions. I know that's kind of where you're coming from. Obviously, that's kind of the basis of your Ecotopian Careers, website. So these mid-career transitions into the job market. I was going to say, do you think that the same things that you're discussing, and whether it be in your webinars, your articles, are kind of applicable to students as well, like kind of just starting off? Because obviously, I would say when you're in mid-career, you're kind of able to already leverage some of the skills that you already have. Whereas in university, we're looking at, oh, how can I get into sustainability? And oftentimes, like these entry-level jobs just aren't there. That's why ultimately me, as much as I do as much sustainability work like at this university, I realize I'll probably just have to go with like a more traditional career for the first 5 to 7 years potentially until I can actually build up those skills. So I guess my ultimate question is, what kind of overlap do you see in like mid-career transition that you write about and potentially like skills that younger students can develop for themselves?
Yeah, look, I think there is quite a bit of overlap. Every age group has its problems, right? Most actually, both young people and old people experience ageism in different ways. So everyone's got their own challenges. I think quite a lot of the conversation around mid-career transitions is applicable to students. There are some things that students have got an advantage on, and that is that people understand where you're coming from. So if you're doing some kind of sustainability related undergraduate or postgraduate degree, and you're applying for jobs in that space, people at least understand the journey that you're on. The pathway is intuitive and obvious. You have an interest in it, you study it, you try and get a job. Now that's actually a much simpler thing to achieve than to transition, because when you transition, you've got to craft a story. You've got to explain to people why it's happening. And maybe you've got all sorts of other problems of, generational disconnects where you might be older and the hiring manager is younger. That causes a lot of problems for people. So there is crossover, and there are some good things as well about being a student. I can talk about a bit more of the crossover in a minute, but I think in terms of what you were saying for getting on a regular career, maybe not. And then also as well, what does that regular career looks like? For example, if you were going into the consultancy business like the Big Four or McKinsey, Boston, Bain, these types of things, they are aggressively moving into the sustainability space right now. So really a job in management consultancy in 2022 is pretty much a job in sustainability, I would argue, because at some point they're just going to hoover up. There's going to be a big shakeout in the sustainability and ESG scene at some point. At the moment, there's all sorts of little bitty players out there. The quality is varying. The qualifications are varying. There's so much aggressive movement in those management consultancies at the moment that I think they're going to end up just absorbing huge amounts of people. And anybody within those consultancies who wants to be doing sustainability, I think will have a reasonably good chance. So I think if I was in your position and I was finding really explicit sustainability jobs or green jobs a little bit elusive, I would just go into management consultancy, because that's going to take over the whole scene. There are other kind of analogous ways of thinking as well. For example, if you're interested in renewable energy and you can't find a job in renewable energy, just get a job in electric, because very soon all electric will be renewable. So there's a case of just kind of thinking a little bit over the horizon, what type of companies that aren't really positioning themselves as sustainability companies now. There's probably going to be a few of them that are going to naturally get funneled in that direction. So if you can't quite make that explicit green job happen right now, think a little bit more creatively.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, one of the things a lot of my one good friend often tells me, who's actually the vice president of net impact here, is, a lot of these sustainability jobs aren't here yet, but if we focus on building up our passion for it and hopefully our skills, we can then capitalize on them when they're here. So kind of your point, a lot of these big four, they're pushing towards more ESG standards, management consulting. Even in like just accounting, it's like carbon accounting is a huge thing. I also lead the investment group here, so we're going to try and talk about ESG investing at some point. And it's just showing that a lot of, especially younger investors, definitely seem interested in, investing where their heart is as well. So kind of to my next point, it was a natural segue there. So over the summer, I had an internship and I was able to talk to someone. I was in corporate development, which is like in-house mergers and acquisitions, but I was able to talk to someone in the company who did kind of venture capital for the circular economy. But he was able to, in a way, kind of similar to, I guess, what your website kind of promotes, kind of transition into that rather than having a sustainability degree itself. So I guess my question is, do you think it's best for students to just maybe stick with, majors that they're potentially in now and then try and, leverage themselves while they're already at a company? Or do you think going a more traditional route, kind of like you were saying earlier, maybe you're passionate about sustainability, maybe you decide to do a master's in sustainability or an MBA that has a specialization in sustainability to help position yourself? Or do you think at this time, like the way the job market is, like students would be able to kind of leverage themselves and position themselves by crafting that story? Obviously, you said one's a little bit more difficult, but I guess I'm just saying, which do you think is better, or the benefits of each, I guess?
Yeah, I think it could work both ways. And here we get into the crossover, I think, between undergraduate and postgraduate students and mid-career people. So here's the analogy. When you are a mid-career person, it's not really the skills that are going to make or break your ability to succeed, rather how you brand and position yourself. And in the same, I'd say something similar is happening as a student. It's not really the degree that's going to make it happen, rather the way you position and brand yourself. So I think you could probably do it both ways. But the important thing is to understand that the degree is not enough. And from, I don't know what it's like at your institution, but in institutions that I've taught at over the years, students are often really focused on getting this degree, getting this piece of paper, this credential.
Yeah.
And they mistakenly assume that if they do well and have this good bit of paper, that things are going to work well for them. But unfortunately, everyone's got a good bit of paper. So that's really the bare minimum. So you've used the word passion earlier on, which is a good word to use. I think what we need to do here is to, first of all, identify that passion and then start building a personal brand around it. And that's where you really need a little bit of focus, because you can't have passion for sustainability, right? You can't have passion for renewable energy. You could have passion for microgrids or battery storage, so you want to try and get down a little bit, drill down to something that's specific. And then the more specific something is, the better chance you have of, one, developing some above average knowledge in that small sphere, two, networking with the right people, and then three, leveraging all of that to create a little bit of a personal brand around it. And then when you start applying for jobs, it becomes easier, because you're not actually a student anymore. You're somebody who actually knows more than the average person in this area. You've been talking about it. You've been connecting with the right people, probably for a couple of years on LinkedIn before you ever try and get a job. Now, that is challenging for people because it requires thinking about focus really quite early. And it also, unfortunately, involves closing doors to things that you might find interesting. Now, the reality is, whether or not you're a student or a mid-career, same thing, you can't keep loads and loads of different doors open. You might be able to keep a few open that are quite similar, but ultimately you've got to narrow it down, because climate is the biggest issue. Not that's the biggest issue, like the most complex issue. So they have the fire hose of climate knowledge. It's impossible to get across it. You can only get across a really tiny slither of it, and you need to be able to demonstrate that above average climate literacy in that one slither. And then so unfortunately, you do have to start filtering your interests and saying no to things. So that's the bad news. But the good news is, once you've done that, the process starts becoming a little bit more manageable, because you've got a far reduced amount of topics that you need to be across, news that you need to be aware of, policies, et cetera, technology, whatever your thing is. A far smaller number of people that you need to get to know. And it's easier because it's smaller.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's a good point, because oftentimes have people, oh, I'm interested in sustainability, but what I'm really interested is maybe working like alternative protein somehow on the business side. And that's kind of more the narrow portion, because I had a guest speaker in last semester. I had a vegan venture capitalist, and I kind of opened up my eyes to, it's like, wow, this industry is huge. I mean, I'm not sure how familiar you are, but lab grown meat is really growing,
Yep.
plant-based meat is really growing. So to me, obviously, I'm still on that journey of figuring out how can I break into that, because it's not as simple as, oh, here's an entry level, vegan analyst or something.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a little bit more complicated, but I really like that fire hose analogy, because it's true. I mean, you're not going to be able to block the whole stream, but ultimately, if you can block that little portion, and then everyone else is blocking their little portion, that's how we're all off. How we're able to kind of solve the problem as a whole.
I might jump in and make a little point, actually, because your point about alternative proteins kind of makes me think about another issue here. And that is the difference between mature and immature parts of the green economy. So alternative protein is a really immature scene. Okay, many of them don't even really have retail products. They're still in the R&D stage.
Yeah.
Quite similar in some ways to like direct air capture. You get a few people like Climeworks who are starting to build real things, but a lot of the time, then they're not scaling. They're just kind of building prototypes and stuff like that. Now, with these immature parts of the green economy, it can be quite challenging to get jobs in them, because they need at that stage really super specialized people. And so you get a lot of people, in alternative protein, you've got a lot of PhDs in cellular architecture and stuff like this. Same kind of expertise required in direct air capture. They don't yet have the need so much for project managers, HR people, growth marketing experts, sales directors, because they don't really have that retail product to scale. So it can be quite difficult to get into those really immature parts. And then if you take something right at the other end of the like timeline, which is probably just going to be solar and wind, which are probably the most mature parts of the whole sector, they're basically just like any huge business, and they've got the whole gamut of roles that are required. So I think it's easier to get into careers that are at that more mature part of the sector than the earlier part, unless you are actually doing a degree that is super targeted on that area. Then you may well have a good chance, but most people aren't, right? They're doing something a little bit more generic.
Yeah, I think what you just said there kind of was able to kind of put words to what I've been thinking about for the past couple of months, but haven't really been able to do it myself, because you're right. It's like, I want to work in alternative protein. I have a passion, been vegan for 4.5 years, lead all these clubs. It's like, how do I do it? Then you look and it's like, well, you don't know cellular like biology or something, so you're out of luck. And it's like, well, there's still value I can bring to the organization, but just positioning myself of how do I do that long term. So thank you for wording that. No, we're almost out of time here, so I'll leave you with one last question, then you can kind of tell people how they can find you. So a lot of people, they're still interested in kind of the green career idea, but they know that they're probably not going to go actually into that field. I would say, what would you suggest? Like, how should they bring about sustainability changes in like their own profession? So say, I don't know, they're, like they just do a traditional career path, but they still want to make it more sustainable somehow. How would you suggest, like in your own experience, they kind of bring about sustainable change in their own way?
Yeah, well, the best answer for this, I think, is to go and read the Project Drawdown Climate Solutions at Work framework. So if you don't know Project Drawdown, they've got a famous little mantra of every job is a climate job. And when I interviewed Project Drawdown when I was going through the idea validation process for Ecotopian Careers, and I asked them, what should people do to get a green job? And their answer was, don't get a green job, make your current job green. And this really transformed the way I was thinking. So there are two interesting resources that they've got: the Climate Solutions at Work framework, which has 8 generic kind of processes that you can do to champion climate issues within your work, mostly whatever the job is. And that framework has been around for a while now. And then literally like 3 or 4 weeks ago, they published a new series of job specific guides, like sales and marketing, IT, finance and legal. I think there may be 8, which give you much more specific insights into what you can do to green those particular jobs. There are a lot of kind of links out to other resources in those guides. So there's no point in reinventing the wheel on this issue. Project Drawdown have already really created the gold standard on this Climate Solutions Work framework. Go and read it. You can download it for free on their website.
Perfect, thank you. And now I was just going to say, Joseph, so if students are watching this, faculty, administrator, whoever ends up watching it, wants to kind of reach out to you, I know you have lots of great resources on your website. How would they go about that?
Yeah, easiest thing to do, go along to the website, ecotopiancareers.com. The first thing that I would recommend people do is to sign up to the newsletter. That provides 2 things. Number one, it gives you access to a free ebook about transitioning into the green economy, and quite a bit of that will be useful whatever age you are. Number 2, is a weekly newsletter that comes with that. It goes out each weekend, and there are typically a significant number of webinars that are listed on that. Not my webinars, but webinars of other people. And and they're all free. And so typically there's 50, something like that on there. And they are for all parts of the green economy. So renewables, alternative protein, circular economy, or more traditional stuff like ecology and conservation. And one of the things that I really love about webinars is that you get a sense of the mood and the energy and the vocabulary and the communication style of each particular kind of subset of the economy.
Yeah.
And that's very hard to do when you're reading an article or reading a book, because that's been edited, curated, and made to be in a very specific way. The kind of communication that you get in those webinars is a little bit more authentic, a little bit more off the cuff, and you just learn more honest information in them. And particularly, you're going to start to learn what kind of energy are people embodying. And this is a point that I would really like people to think about and not discount, is that in the university, unless you're really lucky, and you might be lucky, but unless you're really lucky, the energy is pretty low. University teachers on the whole are very poor performers in the classroom. They don't communicate information in a very dynamic way. That rubs off with students, and they end up getting used to this kind of passive dynamic where they just sit as an audience and consume information from a rather dull individual. They're reading long texts and stuff like this. The business world just does not work that way. There are no long texts really in the business world. There is no passive audience. There are no successful business people who are bad speakers. They are dynamic. They turn people on. They are energized. They are literally on a life mission. And I think it's good to know what that energy is like and to start embodying it a bit, because if you take that kind of standard passive low kind of university style energy and you bring it into an informational interview or even a proper job interview, I don't think it's really going to resonate too well. And the climate scene, more than any other that I've experienced over the years, is just really turned on, high energy. It has an almost evangelical zeal. People are literally on a life mission. And I think you've got to be able to mirror and echo that kind of energy in some way. And that is one of the great things about webinars, because you're going to start to see how some of these people perform.
Yeah, it seems like you're one of the people on evangelical zeal there, especially drawing from your religious studies, it seems.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's really all I had today. I just want to say thank you again so much. I mean, I'm definitely going to be signing up for those webinars, kind of, because I'm still trying to figure it all out. Although I have all this impressive resume, it's like, you know, we're all still figuring it all out together. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Or...
No, it's all good. Listen, I wish you all good luck. I mean, I really want to validate. I think, yeah, there is something I want to add. I'd like to validate the idea that the green economy is absolutely the way forward. Now, all of the evidence points towards this as being the reality, even the conservative kind of statistics. So if you go and look at something like the LinkedIn Green Skills Report, which was published earlier this year, they've got these projections that show, you know, like green jobs developing, I think it was like 8% per year, but people with the skills were developing at 6% a year. And they have this little graph and it's getting wider and wider. And that's like the conservative evidence-based vision of the future, if you like. I don't think it's true, because what they're doing here is they're taking like a linear approach. And what we're discovering with climate is there is no linear approach, it's exponential. So I think what we're going to find is that probably in a relatively short period of time, it's going to be an absolute explosion of green jobs. One of the little quips that I like to make is, in the future, there will be no green economy because the whole economy will be green. Obviously, that's a little bit hyperbolic, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
I think it's all going to go in that direction. So I really want, if anybody's kind of like on the fence, or don't know if this is the right thing to do, it is.